much.
Welcome back to the Forum on Leadership Live Desk here at the George W. Bush Presidential Center in Dallas. I'm Kevin Sullivan. We just wrapped up the announcement of the My Charge to Keep endowment campaign, also a panel on veteran leadership and the awarding of the Military Service Citation. Joining us now live is Blaine Smith, recipient of the George W. Bush Institute Military Service Citation, the inaugural award. It's presented to a post-9/11 veteran who has demonstrated exemplary leadership and continued to practice servant leadership since transitioning to civilian life. Thanks for joining us, Blaine, and congratulations on being the first recipient of the award.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Now, on the panel, Colonel Howe asked you how you felt about it, and you said you were bewildered. Has it sunk in at all? I mean, what does it mean to you to have been selected as the first recipient?
Yeah, so it's truly humbling. I mean, it's hard for me to even describe. It's an honor to be here. Not only because of President Bush and the Bush Center and all the amazing work that's going on, but also just because of the sheer number of amazing military leaders that are out there in their civilian life doing amazing things. So for me to be recognized among so many is it's truly humbling, and I like to think that I'm here representing all of them.
There's so many service organizations out there. We want to get to your work in a minute, but first, what was your transition like personally?
Yeah, so I don't know how long you have here, but the brief story is I transitioned out, was professionally successful without too much trouble. I was able to get a great job. I had some great people help me out in my new company, and I was able to kind of get my legs under me and to do well at work and have a pretty good professional transition. My personal transition was much, much harder. So the loss of identity I had from going from being in the Special Forces to being in the civilian world, being separated from all of my friends, I struggled with my new place in life and a sense of purpose, and that caused some challenges at home, with family, and just sort of, trying to process so much of what I had gone through during my military service, some of which was pretty harrowing and traumatic, especially on my last deployment. And while you're wearing the uniform, you just kind of stuff it down because you've got to move on to the next mission. And so once I got out and took the uniform off, some of that stuff started to bubble up to the surface, and I eventually had to sort of deal with it and sort it out. And luckily I was able to, but it was not an easy process at times, for sure.
What did you do? How did you deal with it?
So a couple of things. A big one is I started reaching out to friends. I wasn't doing so well, and I started calling friends, and I just would call them on the phone when I was driving around between jobs at work or something, and just having someone to talk to. I started spending a lot of time talking to my dad, who had recently retired, so he and I just chatted on the phone a lot. And I went to the VA. I went and talked to the VA, and I said, hey, I'm struggling a little bit processing some of the things from my last deployment, and they got me right in, and I saw a counselor every Monday morning at 7 a.m. for months, and it was a huge help.
You find that Special Forces guys have a tougher transition than others might?
It's hard to say. I don't know if they have a tougher transition, but I do find that folks who served in really hardened combat MOSs, really at the tip of the spear, they do tend to find it a little more challenging to ask for help. Right. I think they would like to think they can just deal with these things and tough them out, and so they don't want to be somebody asking for anything. They just want to take care of themselves and be resilient and move forward. But they deserve the support, and they've certainly earned it, and based on what they've seen in combat, they probably should seek it.
So now you're president of GoRuck.
Right.
Tell us about your work there.
Yeah, so GoRuck is a great small but growing company. We've got about 30 employees based in Jacksonville Beach, Florida, and we make sort of military-inspired gear, apparel, and we put on endurance events about 900 times a year, all sort of designed around the Special Forces way of life, and all built in the USA. So we want to do American manufacturing, lifetime warranty, and we want to get people out and moving and engaged in their communities, primarily through rucking, which is just sort of walking with a backpack, right? Put something on your back and go for a walk. That's rucking. So our ultimate goal is to get more people out, more people rucking, and that's sort of the business angle on that is they need a rucksack, they need clothes to wear, they need people to do it with, and so we're there to sort of fill that need.
Prior to that, you were executive director with Team Red, White, and Blue, another outstanding organization that serves our veterans. You're a talented guy. You could have done a lot of different things. Why did you choose the military, to serve the military veterans? Why was that important to you, and why is it important to our country?
Yeah, well, it's sort of serendipity for me. I was off working in corporate America, and I was sort of struggling like I described, and my good friend Mike Irwin had founded Team RWB, and they didn't have any full-time employees or anything at the time, but it was starting to get some momentum, and they were doing a nice job, and the mission really resonated with me. And so I was involved as a volunteer, and I was sort of going through my own struggles, and so I just connected really deeply with the mission, and Mike and the board offered me an opportunity to be the first employee and to be the executive director, and I really didn't think that hard about it. I just left my job in corporate America, started doing that, and it was important to me because I wanted to help other veterans that were maybe going through some of the same things that I was, and if I could point out the pitfalls and help people through them, that was awesome, and it was just a great opportunity.
You talk a lot about culture, and so what do you do since you've joined GoRuck to align culture there with the values and the mission? I know you talk about action, energy, and purpose.
Sure.
It's kind of the GoRuck way. So how do you align those things?
Yeah, so culture is a big thing no matter where you're at, and at GoRuck, like you said, we're all about action, energy, and purpose. And so one of those things is just leading by example. I mean, I didn't know a lot about the business when I showed up. I mean, I knew a fair amount about the business, but I was new to it. And so it was important for me just to spend time with people, to listen to them, to hear about what they do at work every day, to be there, to go on a ruck after work with people and just sort of lead by example and show that, look, we're a growing business, but we're still a small business, and everyone's got to grab a shovel and go to work. And I think that's a big part of our culture. The other part that I've really tried to help with is just having a culture of like mutual support. So when you're on a military team, you have to have trust. If you're going through the door and turning left, you have to know the guy behind you is going to be right behind you and he's going to be turning right. And so in the workplace, what I found is that if you have a culture of trust, if you have a culture of support, people know they can screw up, they can take chances, they can really feel empowered to work hard, and if they stumble, you're going to be there to pick them up. And so I found that to be a really important part of my job.
You mentioned authenticity and talking about President Bush. Why is it that veterans seem to have such a close relationship with him? Is that the key?
Maybe it's different for all veterans, but I'll tell you that it's so easy when you spend a little bit of time with President Bush to identify how earnest he is in this mission. You can see it in his eyes, you can see it in the way that he talks, you can see it by the fact that he shows up, that he's here and present and fully engaged in all of this stuff, that it is just absolutely the real deal. I feel like I'm a pretty good judge of that in people in general, and President Bush is all in on this. It's completely obvious, and that means the world to folks like me.
Well, thank you for stopping by the live desk, Blaine. Congratulations on being the first recipient of the Bush Institute Military Service Citation.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Now we have Doug Parker, Chairman and CEO of American Airlines, who spoke at our Military Service Citation presentation earlier today. Welcome, Doug. Thanks for stopping by the
Thanks for having
Forum on Leadership live desk, and thank you for your sponsorship and your support of the Forum on Leadership.
Oh, we're honored to do it.
As we sit right outside the American Airlines Pavilion.
Yeah.
So glad you're here. You've talked about, you run the world's largest airline, and yet you've talked about trust and inclusion and these sort of soft topics. How do you do that with the size and scale of your work at American and still emphasize those values?
Yeah, well, I don't think they're soft topics. I think they're hard issues, and they're things. Indeed, in some cases, the size makes it even more important because we can't be out there managing 120,000 people. We need a lead, and leadership mainly means, just taking care of people and caring for people, giving them the tools they need to do their jobs, letting them know what they do is important, thanking them for when they do a great job, so they can go home at the end of the day feeling fulfilled, and letting them know that they work for a company where they have leaders that care. So those things, that's a lot harder than it sounds, actually, and something that we're working really hard to make happen.
Yeah, you're an executive who has not been afraid to do things differently. You're willing to take a measured risk, and so why is that important, to be willing to try different things?
Well, look, I think the old risk-reward relationship is real, and for whatever reason, in the business world, at times, people are so afraid about taking a chance and having it go wrong, and what might therefore happen to them, that the relationship gets even stronger, because if others aren't willing to take risk, those of us that are have an even higher reward possibility. So we look at it as, if there's if there are bets out there all the time that are 1 in 5 chances of happening, but have 20 times returns, you'd take that every time if you were actually placing a bet. Too often in business, people say, wait, if it's 1 in 5 chances of succeeding, if it's 4 in 5 chances I look bad, I can't do that. So that's an opportunity for those that do.
As a fairly young executive, you took over America West 10 days before 9/11 and guided the airline through that crisis. What did you learn through that experience about managing through, catastrophic and crisis situations?
I learned that relationships matter, and we found ourselves in a position we never thought we'd be in. Obviously, the tragedy of 9/11 affected the whole business, but what happened and affected families within the airline business. But what happened from a business perspective is people were immediately afraid to fly. I don't know that sometimes we forget that, but there were several months where Americans didn't want to get on airplanes, and as a result, airlines needed capital, and some more than others. And I was at one that needed it more than any. And there were a lot of reasons to just let us go away because we happened to be the ones that needed it the most. But we relied upon relationships and people that realized, look, we're here to help, and we'll try and help. And thankfully, we built good relationships over time with people that turned out to matter. We didn't build them because we thought they would matter. We built it because I think we have good people who are stand-up people who try to do the right thing. And as a result, when we needed help, we were able to find it.
You haven't always made decisions that have been popular on Wall Street.
Yeah.
So talk about that a little bit. How do you convince investors that maybe a certain decision is made based on the long-term return, not today's headlines?
Yeah, it's difficult sometimes. I mean, look, first and foremost, we don't own the company. Our investors do. Our shareholders do. That's who we work for. So it's not our choice to decide that we're not going to do things that are in their best interest. We have to do things in their best interest because it's their company, not ours. But oftentimes, a good piece of the investment community cares only about the short term. They care about next quarter's earnings. They're not looking to invest long term, they're looking to invest short term. So those investors tend to focus just on what happened this month, what happened in this quarter's results, what's happening in next quarter's results. And if companies think that way, if organizations think that way, you do a disservice to the company, to your team members, to your shareholders, because you don't tend to do the things that need to be done, like long-term investment, like thinking about the long game. So we've chosen to do the things that we believe are right in the long term, explain those to our investors. Some of them don't like it because a lot of those decisions do hurt next quarter's earnings. But we're doing them because what we know is they are good in the long run for American Airlines, for our team, and for our shareholders, and we just need to explain that to them.
What advice do you give young managers and executives coming up at American about leadership? Here we are at the Forum on Leadership. What do you tell your people coming up?
Be a caring leader. Be a servant leader. Take care of the people that work for you. Be the kind of leader that people want to work for, because that'll make them better. And what you'll find is people working together can accomplish infinitely more than they can as a group of individuals. And and it takes a caring leader to make that happen. Someone that actually creates an environment for them that allows them to become the leader they can be.
Well, Doug, thanks for stopping by the live desk, and again, thank you for your support of the Forum on Leadership.
Thanks for what you do. I appreciate it.
Thank
you much.
That was Doug Parker, CEO of American Airlines. He spoke at our military citation event presentation just a little bit ago. You can check that out at bushcenter.org if you missed it live. Now with us, buckle your seatbelts, is Scott Phoenix, co-founder of Vicarious, an artificial intelligence company based in the Bay Area. He'll join Ken Hirsch in a little bit for a discussion on 21st century technology later this afternoon. Scott, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We've had a lot of luminaries come through here the last 2 days. You definitely have the coolest name of anybody who's been here. So we're glad you're here.
I appreciate it.
Now, where are we with artificial intelligence here in 2018? Where do we stand and what's coming next and how soon?
Yeah, so I think it's a really exciting time. We're in the golden age of artificial intelligence right now, and it's everywhere, right? It's on our cell phones, it's on the internet, it's on our computers, and I think that what you'll see happen over the next 5 to 10 years is a diffusion of AI from being something that you predominantly see in technology companies like Facebook and Google to something that you see in the Fortune 1000. Companies that you wouldn't think of as using AI, like maybe Procter & Gamble, of actually incorporating AI into their decision-making that currently they do with spreadsheets and intuition.
How could they? What would be, take us through that example. How would Procter & Gamble use AI to make decisions on products or whatever it might be?
Well, my favorite lens on looking at what's happening with AI today is a decrease in the price of prediction. And so as prediction gets cheaper, people who have lots of data that they can use to make better predictions can use it everywhere. So for Procter & Gamble, what I would be doing if I were involved with that company is looking at the data assets they have, customer behaviors and products, and looking at that as a way to take decisions that used to be made about marketing spend and think about how to systematize them and A/B test them the same way advertisers at Facebook do today.
Well, tell us about Vicarious. Tell us about the company and what you're working on.
Thanks. Yeah, so Vicarious is actually focused on the next generation of AI. We're building technology that comes after deep learning, after what a lot of people are working with today. And the focus of Vicarious is building AI for the robot age. Right now, robots are extremely expensive, and they're not used anywhere because of that. And to make robots cheap, you really need innovations on artificial intelligence that helps robots adapt to changing environments and help them accomplish new tasks they weren't previously programmed to do. And so that's the primary focus of our work at Vicarious.
What do you say to people who are afraid of the robots are coming, they're going to take my job? What do you say to them?
I think this is a really important question, and it deserves more than the few minutes we have together. And I think that every technology, new technology, like if you zoom back in the last 3,000 years of human history, it's a story of us building new machines that take a job that used to take 5 people a day to achieve and replace it with a machine that lets one person do it in a couple of hours. And that's true of the printing press, that's true of the wheel, that's true of the telephone, and that's also true of artificial intelligence. And so I think with all of these new changes in technology, after that 3,000 years of human history, what we have are more jobs and more people and a better society than we've ever had. So I think that in the long run, AI is going to take us to that destination. In the short run, we need to be thinking really critically about how we can use policy, how we can use education, and use many of the tools at our disposal as a society to help make that transition as seamless and as beneficial to everyone as possible.
At Vicarious, you've attracted a kind of a blue ribbon list of tech entrepreneur investors, right? Mm-hmm. So what have you learned from them, from maybe from the tech community outside of the AI space that you used?
I have enormous respect for all of our investors. People like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg. These are people who I look up to, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs look up to for having created their own respective industries. And when I think of people like Elon and Zuckerberg and Bezos, what inspires me most, or what I feel like I've learned most about them, is that they all selected a goal that sounded crazy at the outset, right? So Elon's goal when he started SpaceX was he wanted to build a permanent human colony on Mars. And Bezos wanted to build a store that you could buy everything that's for sale from. And to be able to set that as a long-term goal and then take the incremental steps required to get us to a reality where now Elon is close to a Mars colony and Amazon really is an everything store, I think it's really inspiring and what I hope to do with Vicarious.
You ever worry about AI getting too smart?
AI getting too smart? Well,
taking over human thinking and intuition and
I think
instinct.
there's two halves to this question. One is, do I worry about us becoming too reliant on AI? And I think that ship has already sailed, in the sense that we're so reliant on technology now in terms of Google Maps and cell phones and computers, and everything runs on electricity. If we didn't have electricity and we didn't have the technologies that we've built, we would be really lost. And so I think that I don't worry about us becoming too reliant on AI, because it's just another technology that we're already relying on many technologies. In terms of it having its own agency and making decisions that we're uncomfortable with, I think there's a separation that we can introduce between what an AI wants and its ability to reason about cause and effect. So, Google Maps, does Google Maps want to do something different than give you directions? Of course not. It's just a program. And I think if we view AI as just another tool that can give us new knowledge that we didn't have before, or help us solve problems that were hard for humans, then I think it becomes a lot less scary.
We'll get you out of here on this one. What is it going to look like? What are the headlines about AI going to be? Is it 5 years or 10 years? Like, when is it really going to be?
In 5 and 10 years. So I'd say in 10 years, I'd say the headlines about AI are going to be all around robots. We live in this world where the average person sees 0 robots a year, and I think that's going to change in a big way. In the same way that the average person saw 0 computers a year in 1950.
Right.
And so that's, I think, the societal shift that we'll see in the next 10 years.
So it'll become a normal part of the way we live and do business.
Exactly. I think robots will become part of everyday life, just like computers are today.
Right. Well, I can't wait for that, as long as I can help around the house.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thanks for stopping by, Scott. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have fun with Ken on the panel.
Yeah, thank you.
That was Scott Phoenix, co-founder of Vicarious. Interesting chat. Earlier today, I got to sit down with Terry Tennelian, senior behavioral scientist at RAND Corporation, who is well known for her expertise on veteran mental health. She's a fellow of the Military Service Initiative here at the Bush Institute. Let's take a look at that interview. We're now joined at the live desk by Terry Tennelian, Senior Behavioral Scientist at RAND Corporation, but more accurately, one of the foremost experts in the country on veteran military health and policy. Thanks for joining us, Terry. Appreciate you coming by the live desk.
Happy to be here.
It was 10 years ago that you wrote a report entitled The Invisible Wounds of War. In fact,
Right.
That's where the phrase comes from.
Correct.
So what about it, and what kind of progress have we made in the past 10 years?
Right. Well, my colleagues and I had the honor and privilege to study really what the scale and scope of the invisible wounds of war was for our nation. How common was PTSD, depression, and traumatic brain injury among our returning troops from Iraq and Afghanistan? What were the costs, both economically as well as socially, for the troops, their families, and our nation? And what was our system of care? Where were the gaps? Where were the opportunities for trying to fill those gaps to make sure that all those who were coming home experiencing PTSD, depression, or traumatic brain injury could be served? We identified a number of gaps, a number of issues that needed to be addressed at the federal level, but also in the non-governmental sector. And so since that time, we've seen hundreds of billions of dollars invested in improving how the Department of Defense, how the Department of Veterans Affairs have really expanded their mental health capabilities, hiring more providers, putting in better screening approaches, better therapeutics. But we've also seen a proliferation of effort in the non-governmental sector through philanthropy and a number of investments in community-based programs to try to meet the needs of veterans and their families who are struggling with these issues.
So are we making progress? Are the veterans getting the treatment they need? And what's the state of play there?
So while we've had enormous investment, and I think that's really been great progress in trying to raise awareness about these issues and these conditions and the challenges that veterans are facing, we've made some progress, but we have a long way to go. And so one of the things that we identified in that early report was the gap in access to high quality services. And so while we identified about 20% of returning veterans were struggling with either PTSD or depression, only about half of those were getting care. And of that care that they were receiving, only about half of that was minimally adequate. And so there was a significant challenge in making sure that all of our providers were delivering high quality care. So we have a long way to go. We see that statistics haven't really changed that much. And so while we are working to get more people into care, we still have a significant barrier in making sure more.
And you've played a role with the Bush Institute in setting up the Warrior Wellness Alliance to help provide that care, right?
Yes. So I've had the honor to work with the Bush Institute for almost 4 years now, and thinking through how to take some of the research and the evidence and all of the great effort that's been going on to inform these issues and put it into action. And one of those actions is the creation of the Warrior Wellness Alliance, really bringing together some of the best-in-class community-based clinical programs who are addressing PTSD, depression, and traumatic brain injury among our veterans, and pair them up with state-of-the-art peer-based programs for connecting some of our post-9/11 veterans to engagement opportunities.
And for people watching our live stream, what should they know about our returning veterans who PTS can be a scary proposition for the public and for a potential employer?
Well, it can be, and the majority of our veterans are actually doing very well, thriving, and in wonderful leadership positions. And some are challenged by post-traumatic stress disorder and other mental health conditions as a result of their service or as some other challenges that they face. And they are treatable, and these are conditions that, with the right approaches, can be addressed. The symptoms remit, and individuals will live healthy and successful lives. And our veterans are a strength that our nation has, and we should do everything we can to support them to help them transition into those next careers.
Well, thank you for your work with the Bush Institute, Terry, and thank you for coming by the live desk.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Joining us now are Mark Langdale, who was the founding president of the Bush Foundation and former U.S. ambassador to Costa Rica, and Gene Phillips, a fellow member of the board here at the Bush Center and senior vice president of corporate affairs and international relations for Hunt. Gene served President Bush's administration as the U.S. permanent representative to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Welcome, Mark and Gene.
Thanks,
Great to have you here at the live desk.
Yeah.
Mark, we'll start with you. It's been 5 years almost. Next week will be the 5th anniversary of dedication. What do you think when you look at what's gone on here the last 2 days with the Forum on Leadership and how far the Bush Center has come since its founding days.
Oh, it's amazing. It's amazing, Sully. Laura Bush had a vision and led a design effort to put this presidential center on the campus of SMU, and it was a privilege for me to be able to help her bring that to fruition and a reality. It had a lot of support, mainly from people who were motivated to thank the Bushes for their service to our country, and how they conducted that service with honor and grace and dignity while they were in office, and to thank them for keeping us safe. And so the motivations for originally raising the money were those. But coming here today and seeing what goes on in the building 5 years later, and the impact of the programs and how exciting they are, and how President Bush and Mrs. Bush have conducted themselves post-presidency with honor and dignity and with grace, and in a way that we expect our leaders to conduct themselves. People are re-energized and motivated to reinvest in this and have those principled leadership ideals, and these programs continue. So it's really exciting to see.
People watching on our live stream may not be aware that the center opened with no debt back in 2013. How were you able to pull that off, especially since you started raising the money not too far removed from the Great Recession?
Well, it started off slow. There's no question about that. The financial correction of 2008 and early 2009 was a pretty severe one, but over time we were able to convince people that this was an important legacy for the two-term Bush presidency and his governorship and his principled leadership. And it's also a jewel on the campus of SMU, so a lot of SMU alumni who were had the vision to see that it was really going to be important for the university chipped in as well. So we were able to open the building debt-free, which is pretty unheard of in the presidential library world.
Right. And Gene, we just saw the announcement of the My Charge to Keep endowment campaign. Talk a little bit about what that means and how important that is to sustain the work here.
Well, I think the president really has kept his charge for being responsible and upholding the values that he and Mrs. Bush believed in when they were in the White House, and also in the governor's office in Texas. That is the name of a hymn, a Methodist hymn called A Charge to Keep, and it speaks to personal responsibility. So I think for this campaign, it's just for all of us to make sure that the values and the principles that we believe in, that we think are so American and so exemplified by the Bushes and their family, we think that it's our charge to keep those in place for the next generation and the next and the next. And that's why the theme was selected, and people have responded very favorably. We're way down the path on getting to our goal of $300 million, and we hope that everyone who believes in the same values and principles that President Bush put forth when he was governor of Texas and then president of the United States will join us in this effort.
Now, in the original Capitol campaign to build the center, there were donations, small and large, from all around the world. Do you expect the same sort of response to the endowment campaign?
We do, and the president has always been very proud of his donations of $1 and $5 and $10, and even in the campaign days, that was something that he focused on and looked for. And I think that this campaign will have the exact results. We will have people from every stripe of life who just look up one day at their kitchen table and say, I believe in what George W. Bush believes in, and I believe in keeping those values protected for generations to come, and I'm sending in my $5.
Which is really important. And for Mark, for you, one of the great things about announcing the campaign at the Forum on Leadership is people really see the work that's being done here. It's not just the museum and the library, which are important and meaningful, but all the work that continues based on the values of President and Mrs. Bush. And that's grown enormously since you were the original president.
Going forward, the programming is going to be key, but I really believe that the motivation that people are going to have to want to give to this campaign is the inspiration of the leadership of President Bush. People want their leaders to inspire them. They want them to appeal to their better angels. They want them to lead by example. And if you have been here the last couple of days, all of those things are dramatically evident in the leadership that President Bush had in his presidency and the leadership that he oversees at this center. And people are hungry for that today, and they want it from their leaders. And he's an example of it. and it's on a campus here where it can inspire future generations. And I think people are going to see that that's something that's really important to invest in for the future of our country.
And Gene, beyond the SMU campus, how important is the Presidential Center here to Dallas, to North Texas, to the region?
I think it's important to the world. The programming that's happening here is so exciting. The ideas that are looked at, developed, and executed, and the results. This is not a think tank. It's a do tank, to quote the 43rd president. And the actions and the things that are happening for veterans, for women, for education, so many things are coming out of here that are meaningful and powerful, and they'll go far into the future.
Well, thank you to Ambassador Langdale and Ambassador Phillips for spending a few minutes here with us at the live desk. Thanks for getting us off to a great start 5 years ago here at the Bush Center. And, you know, as the president said, the best is yet to come.
Thank you,
It's an honor
Kevin.
to be on the Sully Show.
It is. Thanks, Kevin.
You boosted our ratings. Well, that was Mark Langdale and Gene Phillips. And that was fun. We're grateful for their service on the Bush Center's Board of Directors and all that they do here at the Bush Center. Now we're here live with Dr. Klaus Desmet, Professor of Economics at SMU. Klaus moderated a fascinating panel yesterday discussing conservation, the Bush Center's native Texas prairie lands, and garden living. Klaus, welcome to the live desk. Thanks for coming by.
Thanks very much.
Now, you're an economics guy and you study urban environments. You're kind of a cities guy, right?
Yes. I'm an urban economist, and so let me tell you maybe very briefly what we discussed in our panel yesterday. We were looking at broader societal and economic benefits of conservation and of green spaces in our cities. As you know, Mrs. Bush has been a big promoter of recovering some of the native landscapes in urban settings. In fact, you know, one of the great examples is the very garden that surrounds the Bush Presidential Center. And as an urban economist, what I can tell you is that people, when deciding where to live, they actually care more and more about what we call urban amenities. That includes the natural environment. It includes green spaces, biking trails, hiking, etc., etc. And because people care more and more about this, businesses also care more about these types of urban amenities, because essentially businesses will want to go where people want to live.
We're going to hear from Jeff Bezos tomorrow at SMU. Amazon right now is selecting the location for its second headquarters, and those things will certainly weigh into their decision.
Yes, indeed. And in fact, to me, it was very interesting that in one of their, they've put forth a number of criteria. One of them is quality of life, and they very specifically say that they want to locate where their employees want to live. And the quality of life includes many, many aspects, including, of course, recreational opportunities, the environment, natural habitat, etc.
You've talked in your work about the success of Dallas as a city. What factors have contributed to, from an economist standpoint, for Dallas being so successful?
Yeah, so I've done some comparative work trying to understand what makes Dallas what it is. And I would say that compared to many other metro areas in this country, maybe Dallas or DFW is one of the best for the middle class. And then you could say, well, why is that? Well, I would say there's two main factors contributing to this. One is that housing is still relatively affordable. It's becoming maybe a little bit less so, but it's still relatively affordable. And that comes because there's a lot of land availability, and the land is relatively unregulated. And then a second factor which makes DFW interesting is that it is a very decentralized, multi-centric city. So there's, of course, Dallas, and there's also Fort Worth, but there's the northern suburbs, for example, of Plano and Frisco, that are attracting a lot of company headquarters and a lot of jobs. And because it is so decentralized and multi-centric, it doesn't suffer from some of the other problems that are faced by the typical big metro areas, such as, for example, congestion. if you think about a city that keeps growing, normally congestion becomes a bigger and bigger problem because people need to commute farther and farther to the central business district. It turns out that in DFW, the number of jobs or the percentage of jobs in the central business district compared to other metro areas in the country is actually relatively low, because there are jobs a little bit everywhere spread out across the metroplex. And that means that you could, for example, be residing in Plano or in Frisco or in McKinney and actually work there. You don't need to commute on a daily basis to the downtown area, and that keeps attracting people to move here. It keeps attracting businesses to come here.
Now, this week we announced a new partnership between the Bush Institute and the Economics Department at SMU for an economic growth initiative. Just another, maybe the most recent example of our strong partnership between SMU and the Bush Center. How much are you looking forward to that partnership?
I must say we are extremely excited about this. We are looking forward to this partnership very, very much. I mean, what we are hoping to do for this partnership is we are planning to use our academic and evidence-based research to speak to some of the challenges, economic and societal challenges that this country and that the world face. And I think this partnership will be very fruitful and very productive. I think we have a great faculty at SMU. The Bush Institute has fantastic people, and it's really very, very promising. We're just at the start of something that we hope will grow into something meaningful, not just for us, but for the Bush Institute, but for society at large.
Well, Professor Desmet, thank you for joining us here on the live desk.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
So much.
Thank you. You bet. That was Klaus.